The late afternoon sun hung low over the quiet roadside diner, turning everything gold. The dusty windows, the metal sign that creaked in the breeze, the row of aging cars parked along the curb. Across the lot, where the shadows stretched longest, an elderly woman stood alone, clutching her small brown handbag as though it were the only solid thing left in the world. Her name was Mrs. Lorna Hale, known by most locals as the gentle woman who fed stray cats behind the library and always smiled with her eyes. Today, though, her eyes were rimmed with fear. A trio of teenage boys circled her like impatient wolves, each holding up a phone, recording, snickering. Their laughter echoed strangely in the stillness of the hour. One of them leaned in far too close, mouthing exaggerated words she couldn't fully catch. She squinted, trying to read his lips, but he moved them too fast, deliberately confusing her. She caught only fragments. Old, weird, look at her, her throat tightened. Lorna had been deaf since she was 5. She had lived a lifetime learning to navigate a world that never slowed down long enough for her to hear it. She was used to misunderstandings, even impatience, but not this. Not cruelty delivered with gleeful precision. The tallest boy flicked her handbag strap, making her jump. Another boy moved his phone closer to her face, angling it to capture her trembling chin, her watering eyes. One of them mimicked her startled reaction, shaking his hands as though mocking a fragile bird. Their friends laughed louder, feeding off each other, the way only teenagers full of misplaced confidence could. Lorna tried to form words. "Stop. Please, just let me go," but her voice, soft from years of disuse, barely surfaced. She took a step back, but her heel caught on a crack in the pavement, and she wavered. The boys didn't offer help. They only stepped back to get a better shot. She pressed her fingers to her lips, took a shaky breath, and lifted her chin, trying to gather whatever dignity she had left. She wanted to walk away. She wanted to believe the world was still kinder than this. But their phones followed her like mirrors intent on capturing her breaking point. The sun kept sinking. The laughter kept rising. And for a moment, one long, fragile moment, Lorna wondered if anyone at all could see what was happening to her. Inside the diner, warmth pooled around every corner, the hiss of the grill, the soft clatter of dishes, the smell of frying onions mingling with fresh coffee. A traveling playlist crackled from an old jukebox, blending with the low murmur of tired truckers and families finishing early dinners. The door swung open with a metallic clang, letting in a wave of wind and the deep rumble of motorcycle engines outside. A group of riders filed in, leather vests creaking, boots tapping like slow thunder across the tile floor. They weren't the rowdy type. More like weather-beaten wanderers carrying miles of road dust and a sense of quiet loyalty that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Tank, the tallest of them, carried the kind of silence that pulled eyes without demanding attention. His beard was streaked with gray, his expression stern but kind. He and his crew chose a booth near the window, the kind where the vinyl seats always stuck a little to the skin. The waitress, Maria, approached with a grin. "Long ride today." Tank nodded once. "Since sunrise. Then you'll want coffee," she said, already pouring. As the group chatted in low tones, Tank's gaze drifted toward the window, an old habit born from years of watching his surroundings. He caught a flicker of movement in the parking lot. Something small, something wrong. The shape of an elderly woman shrinking in on herself as teenagers crowded her. Their posture wasn't playful. Their faces weren't innocent. Tank froze. The others noticed the shift in his shoulders. "What's up?" asked Brick, a scar-faced rider who rarely missed trouble. Tank didn't answer immediately. Instead, he raised a hand, motioning for them to look. The riders leaned toward the window. Their expressions hardened in near-perfect unison, as if someone had flipped a switch that replaced road-worn relaxation with fierce purpose. "Kids messing with her," Sable muttered, her voice low and sharp. "She looks terrified." Tank stood slowly. No rush, no panic, just absolute resolve. His chair scraped the floor as he pushed it back. "Something's wrong," he said, voice steady. Outside, he didn't need to say more. The entire crew rose without hesitation. They didn't grab their food. They didn't ask questions. They didn't debate whether to get involved. They simply followed Tank toward the door, boots hitting the floor in heavy, synchronized steps. By the time the bell above the diner door chimed again, the warm, cozy noise inside faded behind them, replaced by the cold clarity of a single mission. The boys outside were still laughing, still pointing their phones, their bravado swelling like a bubble about to burst. They hadn't noticed the change in the air, hadn't felt the tension creeping in like a storm moving over a quiet town. That is, not until the shadows shifted, stretching longer and darker across the pavement. Tank stepped onto the lot first, his boots heavy against the cracked asphalt. Behind him, the rest of the riders fanned out, forming an unbroken line that seemed to hum with silent authority. The sun caught the metal of their bikes, glinting sharply, as though the machines themselves were extensions of the riders, presence, force and protection forged into steel and leather. The tallest boy with the phone laughed again, louder this time, and the sound faltered instantly when he realized the laughter had gone unanswered. He glanced up and froze. Tank's gaze met his, calm yet unyielding, and something inside that teen snapped, a flicker of guilt, a seed of fear. He couldn't look away. The other boys followed his eyes, and for the first time, they saw them. The bikers, silent, immovable, a wall between the predator and the prey. Tank crouched slightly, not in menace but in intention, making himself approachable, readable. His voice, low and deliberate, cut through the tension. "Step back," he said. One word, clear, carrying more weight than any shout or threat. The boys instinctively took a step back, their phones lowering as if the cameras themselves understood that this was not the moment for recording. The elderly woman, Mrs. Hale, blinked against the sunlight, confusion and relief mingling on her face. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't even imagined anyone noticing, let alone intervening. Tank reached out slowly, his hands open and visible, showing no threat. "You're safe," he said, enunciating each word carefully so she could read his lips. Her hand trembled as it hovered over her handbag, but she didn't move away. One of the female bikers stepped forward, placing an arm gently around Mrs. Hale's shoulders, guiding her back from the group of bullies. The teenagers shuffled backward, their bravado drained, replaced by a growing awareness of shame. They whispered to each other, uncertain, their laughter gone, replaced by the heavy, stifling presence of accountability. No one shouted. No fists were thrown. There was no need. The bikers' presence alone communicated a simple, undeniable truth: cruelty had limits. Justice had arrived, silent but unshakable. Mrs. Hale exhaled, a long, shaky breath, and for the first time in what felt like hours, allowed herself to smile, small and tentative, at the people who had come to stand for her. The boys stood frozen on the cracked asphalt, phones dangling uselessly from their hands. Their bravado had evaporated entirely, replaced by a strange, heavy silence. They muttered half-formed excuses to each other, but the words felt hollow, meaningless. The bikers didn't need to speak. They had already made their point. They had shown that presence and courage could do what threats could not. Mrs. Hale, still clutching her handbag, took a tentative step toward the diner. Tank and the others flanked her gently, their leather-clad forms a buffer against any lingering danger. One of the younger riders, Sable, spoke softly, almost to herself, but loud enough for Mrs. Hale to read her lips. "You don't ever have to face that alone." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of experience, of battles fought silently on countless roads. A few bystanders had emerged from the diner, drawn by the unusual spectacle. They murmured among themselves, shock and admiration in equal measure. The boys tried to slink away, their phones abandoned on the ground, but some glances met theirs, not of fear, but of quiet disappointment. For the first time, they saw how small cruelty looked when met with courage. Mrs. Hale's lips trembled, and then curved into a faint, genuine smile. She looked up at Tank. "Thank you," she signed slowly, her fingers trembling as she formed the words. Tank nodded, his own expression softening. "Anytime," he signed back, his hand steady and sure. The bikers guided her slowly back to the diner, their engines waiting, idling, as if even the machines sensed the gravity of what had just happened. Mrs. Hale's steps, once hesitant and fearful, grew steadier with each motion, bolstered by the protective presence surrounding her. The sun had dipped lower, casting a warm glow over the scene, turning the asphalt gold, turning what had been a moment of fear into one of relief and quiet heroism. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles and roared back onto the highway, leaving behind a swirl of dust and exhaust. Mrs. Hale waved, small but confident. She had faced cruelty today, yes, but also the kindness of strangers who refused to stand by. She returned to the diner, feeling lighter, her shoulders no longer trembling, her eyes dry at last. Even the boys lingered for a moment, looking at the empty lot, the fading roar of motorcycles echoing in their ears. Some part of them would remember the weight of that silence, the way justice sometimes arrived not with fury, but with unwavering presence.